You didn't wake up one day and decide to erase your family from your life. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't dramatic, and it certainly wasn't easy. It happened slowly, in fragments, in the tightening of your chest during phone calls, in the exhaustion that followed every visit, in the quiet dread that crept in whenever their name appeared on your screen. You tried explaining yourself. You tried being patient. You tried becoming smaller, quieter, more agreeable, hoping that if you adjusted enough, the pain would stop. But it didn't. So one day, almost without ceremony, you chose distance. And from the outside, it looks cold, it looks ungrateful, it looks extreme. But from the inside, it feels like oxygen. Here's the paradox no one prepares you for. The decision that saved your nervous system also fractured your sense of belonging. You escaped the chaos, but you also lost the illusion of unconditional love. You gained peace, but you inherited a grief that doesn't have a funeral, because society understands divorce. It understands breakups. It understands outgrowing friendships. But it does not understand what it means to walk away from the people who were supposed to be your psychological home. So instead, you carry it quietly. The guilt, the second guessing, the late night question that still echoes, was I too sensitive? Or was I finally honest? This video is not here to judge that choice. It's here to understand it. Because people who cut off their family are not running away from love. They are running towards psychological survival. To understand this pattern, we need to talk about relational trauma. Not the kind that leaves bruises, but the kind that rewires your internal compass. Family systems shape the nervous system long before they shape beliefs. When a child grows up in an environment where love is conditional, volatile, or emotionally unsafe, their brain adapts. Not consciously, biologically. 3 key psychological concepts explain this adaptation. 1. Chronic emotional invalidation. Emotional invalidation occurs when a child's internal reality is consistently dismissed, minimized, or punished. You're overreacting. That didn't happen. You're too sensitive. Over time, the child learns a dangerous lesson. Connection requires self-erasure. Neuroscientifically, this trains the brain to associate closeness with threat. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes hyperactive in family interactions, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning and emotional regulation, struggles to stay online. Being around family doesn't feel neutral. It feels like standing in a room where the fire alarm might go off at any moment. 2. Disorganized or avoidant attachment. When caregivers are inconsistent, sometimes loving, sometimes harmful, the child develops disorganized attachment. When closeness repeatedly leads to pain, the system eventually defaults to avoidant attachment as a form of self-defense. Avoidant attachment is not about independence. It is about regulated distance. The body learns, if I stay emotionally separate, I stay safe. Cutting off family in this context is not rebellion. It is the nervous system completing a pattern it started decades earlier. 3. Parentification. Many people who go no contact were not treated as children. They were treated as emotional caretakers. They absorbed adult anxieties. They mediated conflicts. They became the stable one in an unstable system. Parentification forces a child to sacrifice their own developmental needs in order to maintain family equilibrium. And eventually, the psyche reaches a limit. Walking away becomes the first act of self-parenting they've ever known. But here's the part no one romanticizes. Cutting off your family doesn't just remove pain. It also removes context. It removes shared history. It removes mirrors that watched you grow. It removes the comforting fiction that someone, somewhere, knows you from the beginning. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." For many, going no contact is an attempt to finally put that burden down. but the cost is heavy, because even when family was harmful, it still represented belonging, and the human psyche is wired to grieve belonging, even when it was toxic. This creates what psychologists call ambiguous loss, grief without closure. There is no death, no apology, no final conversation that resolves the story. So, the grief becomes recursive. It loops. You grieve the parents you had. You grieve the parents you needed. You grieve the version of yourself that might have existed in a safer home. And beneath it all is the core fear. If I couldn't belong to the people who made me, where do I belong? This fear doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up in moments that should be simple: holidays, milestones, quiet successes. Moments where joy is interrupted by a subtle absence. Not because you regret your choice, but because freedom and loss arrive together. The decision to cut off family does not end the psychological story. It begins a new chapter. In adulthood, this history often manifests in distinct patterns, not as personality flaws, but as coping strategies. You might recognize yourself in some of these. 1. Hyper-independence. You struggle to ask for help, not because you don't need it, but because needing once meant being disappointed. 2. Emotional self-sufficiency that feels like isolation. You handle crises well, but feel strangely alone during calm moments. 3. Difficulty trusting authority or hierarchies. Family was your first authority. When it failed, skepticism became survival. 4. Over-explanation of boundaries. You justify distance repeatedly, hoping someone will finally say, "You were right." 5. Guilt that surfaces during peace. When life is calm, the internalized voice asks if you've done something wrong by feeling okay. 6. A deep sensitivity to emotional manipulation. You sense subtle coercion immediately because you were trained in its language. The work now is not to erase these traits, it is to witness them. Healing begins when you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What did this protect me from?" Unlearning is not about reconnecting at all costs. It is about reclaiming agency over your internal world. Healing for those who cut off family is not about forgiveness on a schedule. It is about integration. It begins with inner child reparenting, learning to offer yourself the safety, consistency, and validation that were missing. It involves shadow work, acknowledging both the relief and the grief without judging either. And most importantly, it requires choosing softness without reopening old wounds. You are allowed to build chosen family. You are allowed to define loyalty on your own terms. You are allowed to honor your nervous system as evidence, not weakness. The philosopher Simone Weil once said, "To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul." Sometimes the old roots were poisoned, and growing new ones is not betrayal, it is evolution. The truth is this: you didn't cut off your family because you lack love. You did it because you finally learned how much love costs when it requires self-abandonment. And healing is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming whole. If this resonated, it's because you're not alone in this quiet grief. Share it with someone who carries it too. And remember, you were never broken. You were surviving.